Rags don't belong in a place like this. The words came from behind the bar, sharp and dismissive, cutting through the noise of clinking glasses and corporate laughter. Mira Duval heard them clearly, even over the Friday night chaos of Lawson and Ledger's downtown location. She looked up from wiping down table 7 and saw him immediately, a man in torn denim and a fading hoodie, boots that looked like they'd walked through every hard mile this city had to offer. His head was down, shoulders curved inward like he was trying to take up less space in the world. The shift supervisor, Rylan Cross, stood behind the host stand with his arms crossed, watching the stranger with the kind of contempt reserved for people who couldn't pad his tip pool. "Keep him quick," Rylan muttered to Mira as she passed. People who look like that never tip. But Mira didn't see a nuisance. She saw exhaustion. She saw hunger. She saw someone who could have been her brother, or herself, on a different night when the bills piled higher than her paycheck could reach. The stranger slid into a corner booth, his movements careful, like someone who knew what it felt like to be told they didn't belong. When Mira approached, he didn't meet her eyes. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "What's the cheapest thing you've got?" Mira paused. She looked at his hands, calloused, trembling slightly. She looked at his face, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Then she made a choice. She wrote nothing on her notepad, smiled gently, and said, "Let me bring you something good. On the house." The man's head lifted. His eyes met hers, searching, stunned, disbelieving. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. What Mira didn't know was that the man sitting in her section wasn't broke at all. He owned the bar, and her single act of compassion was about to expose a web of corruption, cruelty, and theft that would shatter everything he thought he knew about the business he'd built. The night had already worn Mira down to her bones, and it wasn't even 9 o'clock. Table 3 wanted their steaks sent back for the 3rd time. Table 9 had been nursing 2 beers for an hour while occupying a 6-top during prime seating. Table 12's corporate group had racked up a $400 tab and left her a 20, then complained to Rylan when she didn't smile wide enough in gratitude. Her feet ached, her back screamed. And somewhere in the pocket of her apron, her phone buzzed with another overdue notice she couldn't afford to look at. This was survival, not service. When the man in the torn hoodie walked through the glass doors, Mira noticed him immediately, not because he stood out, but because Rylan made sure everyone did. The shift supervisor's lip curled as he watched the stranger scan the room, clearly uncomfortable, clearly out of place among the tailored suits and platinum credit cards. "Mira," Rylan hissed as she passed the bar. "Corner booth. In and out. No freebies, no conversation. Got it?" She nodded, grabbed a menu, and made her way over. The man sat with his back to the wall, his hands folded on the table like he was trying to make himself smaller. His hoodie was frayed at the cuffs. His jeans had a patch on one knee that didn't quite match the denim. His boots, scuffed, salt-stained, had seen better years. But his eyes, when he finally looked up, were sharp, watchful, like he was taking in every detail of the room, every interaction, every subtle shift in the atmosphere. "Evening," Mira said gently, setting the menu down. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" He shook his head quickly. "Just, what's the cheapest thing you've got? I don't need much." There was no shame in his voice, just honesty, raw and unguarded. Mira's chest tightened. She'd heard that question before, not here, but in her own head, standing in a grocery store aisle trying to calculate whether she could afford both her mother's medication and rent that month. She knew what it felt like to be hungry and too proud to say it outright. She knew what it felt like to ask for the least, hoping someone might offer more. She glanced back toward the bar. Rylan was watching, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She made her choice in a heartbeat. "Let me bring you something good," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Burger, fries, and a drink. On the house." The man froze. His eyes widened, flicking from her face to the menu and back again, like he was trying to understand a language he'd forgotten. I can't." "You're not," Mira interrupted gently. "I am." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then slowly something shifted in his expression. Surprise, confusion, and something deeper. Gratitude. The kind that came from being seen when you thought you were invisible. "Thank you," he whispered. Mira nodded and walked away before her voice could crack. She didn't see the way his gaze followed her across the floor. She didn't see him pull a small notebook from his pocket and write something down. She didn't see the way his jaw tightened as Rylan intercepted her near the kitchen, grabbing her arm hard enough to leave a mark. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Rylan's voice was low, venomous. "You think you can just give away food? That comes out of your pocket, Duvall, not mine." "I'll pay for it," Mira said quietly, pulling her arm free. "Damn right you will." Rylan leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "And next time you pull something like that, you're done. You hear me? Done." Mira nodded, her hands trembling as she pushed through the kitchen doors. Behind her, in the corner booth, Cade Lawson sat in silence. He'd come here to observe. To investigate the complaints that had been piling up in his inbox for months, reports of high turnover, staff mistreatment, and a manager whose numbers looked perfect on paper, but whose reputation painted a darker picture. He'd expected indifference, maybe hostility. He hadn't expected kindness. And now, watching the woman who'd shown him humanity get threatened in his own bar. Cade felt something shift inside him. A cold, quiet rage that promised one thing. This was only the beginning. Rylan Cross had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the first thing people noticed about him, the way his mouth curved in all the right ways while his gaze stayed flat, calculating, always measuring what he could take from you. He wore it like a uniform, sharp and polished, designed to disarm. But Mira had learned to read the difference between a smile and a warning. And tonight, Rylan was all warning. She moved through her tables with mechanical precision, keeping her head down, her service flawless. She didn't look toward the corner booth where the stranger sat, slowly eating the burger she'd given him. She didn't glance at Rylan, who lingered near the POS system like a vulture circling prey. At 10:30, the Friday rush finally ebbed. The corporate groups filtered out, leaving behind lipstick-stained glasses and crumpled napkins. Mira's section emptied except for 2 tables, one couple finishing dessert, and the man in the corner, who'd been nursing his water for the past hour, just sitting quietly. She approached to clear his plate. "Can I get you anything else?" He looked up, and again, she was struck by the intensity in his eyes, like he was studying her, trying to understand something he couldn't quite name. "No, thank you for everything." Mira offered a small smile. "Take care of yourself." As she turned to leave, he spoke again, his voice low. "Does he always treat you like that?" She froze mid-step. "Excuse me?" "Your manager." The stranger's gaze flicked toward Rylan, who was now at the bar, counting out the tip pool with two other servers. Does he always talk to you that way? Mira's stomach twisted. It's fine. It's just how it is here. It shouldn't be. The words hung in the air, quiet but weighted with something Mira couldn't place. Conviction, maybe. Or anger. Before she could respond, Rylan's voice cut across the floor. Duval, back here, now. Mira's heart sank. She excused herself and walked to the bar, where Rylan stood with the cash box open and a ledger in hand. The other servers, Janelle and Marcus, stood off to the side, avoiding eye contact. Let's talk about tonight's tip pool, Rylan said pleasantly, his shark smile firmly in place. He gestured to the cash. Looks like we pulled in $620, not bad for a Friday. Mira frowned. I had over $300 myself. And Janelle had $240. Marcus had $180. Rylan tapped the ledger. Adds up. It didn't. Mira had been counting tips all night. The total should have been closer to $900, maybe more. Where's the rest? She asked quietly. Rylan's smile sharpened. House fees, breakage, the burger you decided to comp without asking me first. That's $18 right there, plus tax. He slid a 20 across the bar. Here's your cut. You're lucky I'm feeling generous. $20 for 8 hours of work, for $300 in tips she'd earned. Mira's hands curled into fists, but she said nothing. She couldn't afford to say anything. Not when her mother's next specialist appointment was in 4 days. Not when she was already 2 months behind on rent. Problem? Rylan asked, his voice dripping with false concern. No, Mira whispered. Good, because if you've got complaints, there's plenty of people who'd kill for your spot. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping. Don't forget that. Mira took the 20 and walked away, her vision blurring. She didn't notice Cade still sitting in the corner booth, his phone angled carefully toward the bar, recording everything. She didn't see the way his expression hardened as he watched Rylan pocket a thick fold of bills and slip them into his jacket. She didn't know that the man she'd shown kindness to had just watched her be robbed in plain sight, and that he was already making calls that would bring Rylan's world crashing down. But she would. Soon. Cade Lawson sat in his car for 20 minutes after leaving the bar, staring at the recording on his phone. The footage was clear. Damning. Rylan Cross, his shift supervisor, casually pocketing tips that didn't belong to him, threatening an employee, creating a hostile environment in a business. Cade had built on the principle of respect and fairness. He'd suspected something was wrong. The complaints had been trickling in for months. Anonymous reports from staff, Glassdoor reviews mentioning toxic management, turnover rates that had spiked 40% in the last quarter at this location alone. But the revenue numbers had stayed strong. The books had looked clean, and Rylan's quarterly reports had painted a picture of efficiency and profitability. Cade had almost dismissed it. Almost. Now, watching the video again, he felt the anger settle into something colder, more dangerous. He opened his contacts and dialed. Isaac, it's me. Isaac Brennan, his business partner and the co-founder of Lawson & Ledger, answered on the second ring. Cade, it's almost midnight. What's wrong? I need you to pull everything on the downtown location. Every invoice, every payroll record, every transaction for the past 18 months. Focus on vendor contracts and tip distribution. There was a pause. What did you find? Theft, harassment, maybe more. Cade's jaw tightened. And I need security footage from tonight. All of it. I'll have it by morning. You want to tell me what's going on? Rylan Cross is stealing from the staff. I watched him do it. And if he's bold enough to do that in the open, I want to know what else he's hiding. Isaac swore softly. I told you we should have vetted him harder. His references were too clean. I know. Cade closed his eyes. Get me the records. I'll handle the rest. He hung up and sat in the silence of his car, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. He'd founded Lawson & Ledger 8 years ago with a simple vision: create spaces where people felt valued, customers and staff alike. He'd grown up poor, working kitchen jobs and bussing tables to pay for community college. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be treated like you didn't matter. He'd promised himself he'd never build a business that made people feel that way. And yet, somehow, he had. Because he'd been too detached, too focused on expansion, on profit margins, on board meetings and investor calls. He'd hired managers and trusted them to uphold his values. He'd reviewed reports but hadn't walked the floors. He'd built an empire but lost sight of the people holding it together. People like Mira. He thought about the way she'd looked at him, not with pity, but with understanding. Like she'd recognized something in him that he'd forgotten was there. She'd given him food she probably couldn't afford to comp. She'd treated him with dignity when everyone else had looked at him like a problem to be solved. And in return, she'd been punished. Cade opened his phone and pulled up the business entity records for Lawson & Ledger. He scrolled through the vendor contracts for the downtown location, cross-referencing them against the supplier database Isaac maintained. 3 names stood out immediately: Apex Beverage Solutions, Imperial Hospitality Supply, North Point Distribution Group. All 3 had started invoicing the downtown location 14 months ago, right around the time Rylan Cross had been promoted to shift supervisor. Cade opened the invoices. The numbers didn't add up. Cases of liquor listed at twice the market rate. Cleaning supplies billed at commercial prices for residential quantities. Food deliveries that didn't match the inventory logs. He pulled up the business registrations for all 3 companies. And there it was. Apex Beverage Solutions. Registered owner: R. Cross. Cade's grip tightened on his phone. Rylan wasn't just stealing tips. He was funneling tens of thousands of dollars through fake vendor contracts, inflating costs, and pocketing the difference. He was bleeding the business dry while keeping the staff too terrified and underpaid to speak up. Cade took a breath, then made another call. Security, this is Cade Lawson. I need a full audit of the downtown location, effective immediately. Lock down all financial records and flag any transactions connected to Rylan Cross. And I need a staff meeting scheduled for Monday night. Mandatory attendance. No exceptions. He hung up and stared at the bar across the street, its neon sign flickering in the dark. Rylan Cross had no idea what was coming. But Mira Duval was about to find out that kindness, real, reckless, impossible kindness, could change everything. Mira's apartment smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. She opened the door just after midnight, her body aching in places she'd stopped acknowledging years ago. The $20 bill Rylan had given her sat folded in her pocket, a bitter reminder of 8 hours she'd never get back. Mira? That you? Her mother's voice drifted from the bedroom, thin and fragile. Yeah, Mom. I'm home. Mira dropped her bag by the door and moved through the small living room, stepping over the piles of medical bills she'd been avoiding for weeks. Past the couch where she slept most nights because the bedroom was easier for her mother to access. Past the kitchen where the fridge hummed too loudly and held too little. Elena Duval sat propped up in bed, her oxygen tank hissing softly beside her. She was only 56, But chronic illness had aged her in ways that broke Mira's heart every time she looked at her. Her mother's hands, once strong and capable, now trembled when she tried to hold a glass. Her breathing came in shallow, labored pulls. "How was work?" Elena asked, her smile weak but genuine. "Fine," Mira lied. She sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The new medication is helping, I think." Mira nodded, even though she knew better was relative. The new medication cost $400 a month. Insurance covered half. The rest came out of Mira's paycheck, or would have, if Rylan hadn't stolen most of her tips tonight. She did the math in her head, the same calculation she'd been running for months. Rent, $1,200. Utilities, $150. Her mother's medications, $600 between the prescriptions and the oxygen. Groceries, $200 if she stretched it. That left almost nothing for the specialist appointment coming up. Nothing for the physical therapy her mother desperately needed. Nothing for the emergency fund that had long since been depleted. She was drowning. Slowly, quietly, and there was no shore in sight. "Mira?" She looked up. Her mother was watching her with that knowing expression, the one that said she understood more than Mira wanted her to. "I'm okay, Mom." "You don't look okay." Elena squeezed her hand. "You look exhausted." "I am always exhausted." "That's what I mean." Mira wanted to argue, but the truth was too heavy to carry alone anymore. She'd been holding it together for 2 years, ever since her mother's diagnosis, ever since the medical bills had started piling up faster than she could pay them. She'd taken on extra shifts, skipped meals, given up anything that wasn't essential. She'd become a ghost in her own life, surviving, but not living. And tonight, giving that stranger a meal she couldn't afford had felt like the first real thing she'd done in months. "I gave someone free food today," Mira said quietly. Elena's eyes softened. "Did they need it?" "Yeah, I think so." "Then it was worth it." "Rylan didn't think so. He docked my pay." Her mother's expression darkened. "That man is a bastard." Mira almost smiled. Elena rarely swore, but when she did, it was always justified. "He is, but he's also the one who controls my schedule. If I push back, I lose my hours. If I lose my hours..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "There are other jobs, Mira. Not ones that'll hire me without experience. Not ones with tips." Mira stood and moved to the window, staring out at the darkened street. "I just need to hold on a little longer. Maybe I can pick up a weekend shift somewhere else. Maybe..." "Mira." She turned. Her mother's eyes were filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to do this." "Don't." Mira crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, taking both of her mother's hands. "Don't apologize. You didn't choose this. Neither did you. No. But I choose to be here. I choose to take care of you. That's not something I regret." Elena cupped her daughter's face, her touch gentle despite the tremor in her fingers. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. Don't let people like Rylan take that from you. Promise me." Mira's throat tightened. "I promise." But even as she said it, she wondered how much longer she could keep that promise. How much more she could give before there was nothing left. She helped her mother settle in for the night, refilled the water glass on the bedside table, and adjusted the oxygen line. Then she retreated to the living room, sank onto the couch, and pulled out her phone. The overdue notices stared back at her. Rent, utilities, credit cards she'd maxed out months ago just to keep the lights on. She opened her banking app. Balance, $247. The specialist appointment alone would cost $300. Mira closed her eyes and let the exhaustion wash over her. She didn't know that across the city, a millionaire was compiling evidence that would change her life. She didn't know that her single act of kindness had set in motion a reckoning that would shatter the system that had been crushing her. She didn't know that help was coming. All she knew was that tomorrow, she'd wake up and do it all over again. Because that's what survival looked like. And for now, survival was all she had. Isaac Brennan arrived at Cade's office at 7 on Saturday morning with 3 banker's boxes and an expression that promised bad news. "You're not going to like this," he said, dropping the boxes on the conference table. Cade had been up all night, cross-referencing vendor records and pulling financial statements. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but his focus was razor-sharp. "Show me." Isaac opened the first box and spread out a series of invoices, bank statements, and contracts. Rylan Cross has been running a procurement scheme for at least 14 months, maybe longer. These are just the records I could verify overnight. He pointed to a highlighted invoice. Apex Beverage Solutions. They're billing your downtown location $38 per case for mid-shelf vodka. Market rate is 18 over 14 months. That's an overpayment of roughly $42,000. Cade's jaw tightened. And he owns Apex. He owns all 3 shell companies. Isaac slid over more documents. Imperial Hospitality Supply and North Point Distribution Group. Same pattern. Inflated pricing, consistent overpayment, money funneling straight into his accounts. How much total? Isaac met his eyes. Conservative estimate, $130,000. But that's just the vendor fraud. There's more. He pulled out a different set of records. Payroll reports, tip distribution logs, and employee complaints that had been filed and mysteriously closed without resolution. Rylan's been systematically shorting the tip pool, based on the transaction records from your POS system versus what he's reporting as distributed. He's been skimming between 20 and 40% every shift. Over 14 months across roughly 60 employees. Isaac did the math on his phone. He's stolen approximately $78,000 from your staff. Cade felt the anger crystallize into something colder, more focused. $200,000. He's stolen $200,000. Give or take. And here's the thing. He's been smart about it. The amounts are small enough individually that they don't trigger automatic audits. He spaces them out. He rotates which vendors he uses. He targets locations with high turnover so employees don't stick around long enough to notice patterns. But people did notice, Cade said quietly. That's why we've been getting complaints. Exactly. And every time someone complained, Rylan was the one investigating. He'd close the case, mark it as unsubstantiated, and the employee would usually quit within a month. Isaac pulled out a list of names. 12 formal complaints in the past year, all closed by Rylan. All 12 employees are no longer with the company. Cade studied the list, his stomach turning. These weren't just numbers. They were people. People who'd tried to speak up and been silenced. People who'd lost their jobs because they'd dared to tell the truth. People like Mira almost became. What else? Cade asked. Isaac hesitated. He's been manipulating schedules. Anyone who questions him, anyone who shows too much initiative or kindness. He cuts their hours, gives them the worst shifts, makes their lives hell until they quit. Constructive dismissal. Exactly. And here's where it gets worse. Isaac pulled out a final document, a spreadsheet with dozens of entries. I found a second ledger on the office computer. Rylan's been keeping meticulous records of who he considers problems. Employees who give discounts to homeless customers, who speak up about working conditions, who don't play along with his scheme. Cade scanned the list. Mira's name was near the top, highlighted in red, with notes next to it. Too soft. Gives away product. Target for reduction. His hands curled into fists. He was planning to fire her, Cade said flatly. Within the week, based on these notes, he was just waiting for one more infraction to justify it. The rage that had been simmering all night finally boiled over. Cade stood and paced to the window, looking out over the city that was just beginning to wake. Somewhere out there, Mira was probably already awake, worrying about bills she couldn't pay, taking care of a mother who needed more than she could afford to give. And the man who was supposed to be managing his business had been systematically destroying her life. "I want criminal charges," Cade said. "Fraud, theft, embezzlement, whatever sticks. And I want civil action for every employee he's stolen from." "Already started the paperwork," Isaac said. "I've got our corporate attorney drafting everything. But Cade, you need to be prepared. This is going to be public. It's going to be messy. The press is going to want to know how this happened under your watch." "I know." Cade turned back to face him. "And I'll answer for that. But first, I'm going to make sure every person Rylan Cross hurt gets made whole. Every dollar he stole gets returned. Every employee he wronged gets justice." Isaac nodded slowly. "Monday night staff meeting?" "Monday night. I'm going to confront him in front of everyone. No closed-door termination. No quiet settlement. He's going to face the people he's been stealing from, and they're going to see exactly what he's done. That's a risk. He could lawyer up. He could run." "He won't run," Cade said quietly. "Men like Rylan don't think they've done anything wrong. He'll stand there and try to talk his way out of it. That's when I'll show everyone the evidence." Isaac gathered the documents back into the boxes. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. This should have been caught sooner, but you're catching it now. That matters." Cade nodded, but the words felt hollow. He'd built a company on values he'd abandoned in practice. He'd been so focused on growth that he'd forgotten to protect the people who made that growth possible. That ended now. "Call the downtown location," Cade said. "I want a mandatory meeting Monday night, 9 p.m. after close. All staff, no exceptions. Tell them it's about new policies and wage adjustments. And Rylan? Tell him the owner is coming. Let him sweat." Isaac smiled grimly. "With pleasure." After Isaac left, Cade sat alone in his office, staring at the list of names. 12 employees forced out. Dozens more exploited. One woman whose kindness had exposed it all. He picked up his phone and opened a new note. Things to fix. 1. Return all stolen wages with interest. 2. Implement third-party tip auditing. 3. Anonymous reporting system. 4. Management oversight restructure. Staff support fund. And at the bottom, he added one more line. 6. Remember why I started this. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Sunday started badly and got worse. Mira woke to her phone buzzing with a text from Rylan. "Schedule change. You're on Monday night closing shift. Mandatory staff meeting after. Don't be late." She stared at the message, her stomach sinking. Closing shift meant she'd be working until after midnight, which meant missing her mother's physical therapy appointment she'd rescheduled twice already. And mandatory meetings were never good news. They usually meant new policies that made their lives harder or thinly veiled threats dressed up as team building. But she couldn't say no. Not when Rylan was looking for any excuse to cut her hours. She dragged herself out of bed and went to check on her mother. Elena was already awake, sitting in her chair by the window, her oxygen line trailing behind her like a leash. "Morning, honey," Elena said, her voice hoarse. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but aren't we all?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You got the mail yesterday?" Mira had. She'd seen the red envelope from the hospital billing department and shoved it in a drawer without opening it. "Yeah." "Mira, I'll handle it." "Mom, don't worry." "That's all I do," Elena said softly. "Worry about you." Mira knelt beside her mother's chair and took her hand. "I'm okay, I promise." But the words felt increasingly hollow. She wasn't okay. She was one bad shift away from losing everything, and they both knew it. She spent the rest of Sunday trying to catch up on life. Laundry, grocery shopping with the last $40 in her account, calling the hospital to negotiate another payment extension. Every task felt insurmountable. Every phone call, a battle she was losing. By the time Monday evening arrived, she was already exhausted. The bar was unusually tense when she arrived for her shift. Rylan was on edge, snapping at everyone, his shark smile replaced with something harder. Janelle whispered that he'd been in the office all day, on phone calls that sounded angry. "You think we're getting fired?" Marcus asked quietly as they prepped their sections. "Maybe they're selling the location," Janelle offered. "I heard the owner's coming tonight." Mira's head snapped up. "The owner?" "That's what Rylan said. Some corporate guy. Probably here to tell us they're cutting staff or wages or something." The shift dragged. Mira moved through her tables on autopilot, her mind racing. If they were cutting staff, she'd be first on the list. Rylan had made that clear. And if she lost this job, she had nothing. No savings, no backup plan, no way to keep her mother alive. At 11:30, Rylan called everyone to the back room. The entire staff, servers, bartenders, kitchen crew, filed in and found seats around the large table usually reserved for inventory meetings. Rylan stood at the head, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Owner's running late," he said curtly. "Should be here in 10 minutes. When he arrives, you smile, you nod, you don't ask stupid questions. Got it?" No one spoke. "I said, got it?" Murmured agreement rippled through the room. Mira sat in the back, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding. Something felt wrong. The tension in the room was suffocating, like everyone was waiting for an axe to fall. At 11:40, the door opened, and Mira's world tilted. The man who walked in wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't carrying a briefcase or surrounded by lawyers. He was wearing dark jeans, a simple button-down, and an expression that was calm, controlled, and absolutely furious. It was him, the man from Friday night, the one in the torn hoodie, the one she'd given a free meal. Except now, looking at him in the light, she saw what she'd missed before. The confidence in his posture, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way every eye in the room turned to him like gravity. "Good evening," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "My name is Cade Lawson. I own this bar, and we need to talk about what's been happening here." Mira couldn't breathe. Rylan's face had gone pale, and Cade's eyes, those sharp, watchful eyes, locked onto Rylan with the precision of a hunter who'd finally cornered his prey. "Let's start," Cade said softly, "with theft." The silence in the room was absolute. Mira sat frozen, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The man she'd given a meal to, the one who'd looked so tired, so defeated, was standing at the front of the room radiating authority like it was a second skin. Cade Lawson, the owner. She'd given the owner of the bar a free burger, and Rylan had threatened her for it. "Mr. Lawson," Rylan said, his shark smile snapping back into place despite the pallor in his face. "I wasn't expecting you until—" "I know," Cade interrupted smoothly. I wanted to observe first. See how things really run when management thinks no one's watching. His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Mira before returning to Rylan. What I saw was enlightening. He set a tablet on the table and tapped the screen. A video began to play, security footage from Friday night, showing Rylan at the bar, counting out tips, pocketing cash, and sliding only a fraction of what should have been distributed to the waiting staff. Gasps rippled through the room. That's from 3 nights ago, Cade said. But it's not an isolated incident. I have footage from the past 6 months showing a consistent pattern of tip theft. Roughly $78,000 stolen from the people in this room. Janelle's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus swore under his breath. Rylan's smile finally cracked. That's not. There are house fees, breakage costs. There are no house fees, Cade said flatly. There never have been. And Lawson and Ledger has a zero-tolerance policy for tip pooling deductions. Every dollar earned by staff goes to staff. You know this, Mr. Cross, because you signed the management agreement that explicitly states it. He pulled up another document on the tablet. The signed contract with Rylan's signature at the bottom. The relevant section highlighted. That's the tip theft, Cade continued. Now let's talk about procurement fraud. Another document appeared on the screen. Invoices from Apex Beverage Solutions, with pricing comparisons next to them. Apex Beverage Solutions is billing this location $38 per case for vodka that costs $18 wholesale. Over 14 months, that's $42,000 in overpayment. Cade's voice was clinical, precise. Apex Beverage Solutions is registered to an R-Cross. That's you, isn't it, Rylan? Rylan said nothing. Imperial Hospitality Supply, North Point Distribution Group, 3 shell companies, all registered to you, all billing this location at inflated rates. Total fraud, approximately $130,000. The room erupted. People were standing, shouting, demanding answers. Rylan backed toward the door, his hands raised. You can't prove. I have bank statements, Cade said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Business registrations, transaction records, and I have this. He pulled up one final document, a spreadsheet with names, dates, and notes. Mira's name was at the top. This is a ledger we found on the office computer. Mr. Cross has been keeping detailed records of employees he considers problems. People who show too much kindness. People who question his authority. People he planned to force out. Cade's eyes found Mira's across the room. People like Mira Duval, who had the audacity to show compassion to a customer who looked like he needed it. Mira's throat closed. She felt every eye in the room turn to her. She was scheduled for termination this week, Cade continued. One more infraction, and she'd have been gone. Not because she was bad at her job, not because she violated policy, but because she was kind. And kindness, apparently, was a threat to Mr. Cross's operation. Rylan's back hit the door. You're taking things out of context. I'm taking things exactly in context, Cade said, his calm finally breaking into something sharp. You've been stealing from these people for over a year. You've been abusing them, manipulating them, forcing out anyone who dared to speak up. And you did it in my business, under my name, while I was too detached to notice. He stepped forward, and Rylan actually flinched. That ends tonight. You're terminated, effective immediately. Criminal charges are being filed for fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Civil suits will follow for every employee you've wronged. And you will repay every dollar you've stolen. You can't. I can. And I am. Cade gestured to the door, where two security guards Mira hadn't noticed before stood waiting. "Escort Mr. Cross out. He's not welcome in any Lawson and Ledger location ever again." Rylan looked around the room, his expression desperate, searching for allies. He found none. The people he'd bullied, stolen from, and threatened stared back at him with expressions ranging from fury to vindication. The guards moved forward. Rylan let them take his arms, his shark smile finally, completely gone. As they led him out, Cade turned back to the staff, his expression softening. "I owe all of you an apology," he said quietly. "This should never have happened. I built this company on principles I failed to enforce. I trusted the wrong person, and you paid the price. That's on me." He paused, letting the words settle. "Here's what happens now. Every dollar stolen from you will be returned, with interest. I'm implementing third-party auditing for all tip distribution. There will be an anonymous reporting system, so no one ever has to fear retaliation for speaking up again. And I'm restructuring management oversight to ensure this never happens at any location." He looked directly at Mira. "And I want to personally thank the person whose kindness exposed all of this. Mira, would you stay after? I'd like to speak with you privately." Mira couldn't find words. She just nodded, her hand trembling in her lap. The meeting ended shortly after. People filed out in clusters, talking in hushed, shocked voices. Within minutes, only Mira and Cade remained. He pulled out a chair across from her and sat down, suddenly looking less like a millionaire owner and more like the tired man in the torn hoodie. "I am sorry," he said simply, "for what you've been through, and for putting you in a position where kindness felt dangerous." Mira found her voice. You were testing us?" "No, I was investigating complaints. The disguise was just to see the truth." He smiled faintly. "I didn't expect someone to treat me like a human being. That wasn't part of the plan. I didn't know. I know, that's what made it real." He slid an envelope across the table. "This is 6 months of back pay for stolen tips, plus compensation for the harassment you endured. It's not enough, but it's a start." Mira opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $18,000. She stared at it, unable to process the number. "There's more," Cade said gently. "I'd like to offer you a management position. Assistant manager with full benefits, including health insurance that covers dependents. I understand your mother needs care." Tears spilled down Mira's cheeks before she could stop them. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you were kind when kindness cost you everything," Cade said. "And that's the kind of person I want leading my team." For the first time in 2 years, Mira let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, survival wasn't all she had left. Maybe there was hope, too. 3 days after the confrontation, Cade stood in the downtown bar at 7 in the morning, watching contractors install new security cameras and audit systems. Isaac sat across from him, reviewing the final settlement numbers on his laptop. "All staff payments processed," Isaac said. 78,000 in stolen tips returned, plus 20% interest. That's 93,600 total. Every employee who worked under Rylan in the past 14 months has been contacted. And the restitution for the procurement fraud? Going to operational improvements and a staff relief fund. 130,000 earmarked for emergency support, continuing education assistance, and mental health resources. Isaac looked up. Rylan's assets have been frozen. Criminal charges filed. His lawyer's already trying to negotiate a plea. "No deals," Cade said flatly. "He faces the full weight of what he did." "Agreed," Isaac closed the laptop. How's Mira doing? Cade smiled slightly. It was the first time he'd smiled in days. She started her management training yesterday. She's nervous, but she's good. Really good. The staff already respects her. Any others stepping up? Marcus and Janelle both accepted supervisor roles. They're helping restructure scheduling and tip distribution protocols. Cade turned from the window. We're also bringing in an outside firm to audit all 15 locations. If Rylan was doing this here, I want to make sure it's not happening anywhere else. Smart. The board's asking questions, by the way. They want to know how this slipped through. Tell them the truth. I was too focused on expansion and not focused enough on the people making it possible. That changes now. Isaac studied him for a moment. You've been different since that night, since you met her. Cade didn't deny it. I forgot what it felt like. To be on the other side. To be the person hoping someone sees you as human. He shook his head. I built this company because I knew what it was like to work those jobs. And somewhere along the way, I lost that connection. Mira reminded me. With one burger. With one choice, Cade corrected. She had every reason to follow Rylan's rules. She was being threatened, underpaid, exploited. But she chose kindness anyway. That takes courage I'd forgotten existed. The contractors finished installing the last camera and gave Cade a thumbs up. He nodded his approval and turned back to Isaac. What about the others on Rylan's target list? The ones he forced out? We've contacted all 12. 7 have accepted settlements and formal apologies. 3 are considering wrongful termination suits. Our legal team is cooperating fully. 2 we haven't been able to reach yet. Keep trying. And make sure they know the door's open if they want to come back. Already done. Cade's phone buzzed. A text from Mira. First shift as manager, nervous. Thank you for believing in me. He typed back. You earned it. Trust yourself. When he looked up, Isaac was watching him with a knowing expression. What? Cade asked. Nothing, just... It's good to see you care again. About the people, not just the business. I always cared. You cared abstractly. Now you care specifically. There's a difference. Cade couldn't argue with that. 3 weeks ago, his staff had been names on payroll reports and turnover statistics. Now, they were people. Individuals with stories, struggles, and lives that extended far beyond his balance sheets. He thought about Mira's apartment, the medical bills stacked on the counter, the oxygen tank hissing in the background, the exhaustion in her eyes that went bone deep. He thought about how close she'd come to losing everything, because one man had decided kindness was weakness. He thought about how many other people were out there, hanging on by threads, one bad manager away from catastrophe. I want to create a foundation, Cade said suddenly. Isaac raised an eyebrow. What kind of foundation? Service industry relief, medical assistance, emergency housing, legal support for workers facing exploitation. Fund it with 5% of company profits annually. That's ambitious. It's necessary. Mira's not unique, Isaac. There are thousands of people like her, working multiple jobs, sacrificing everything, one emergency away from losing it all. If we can help even a fraction of them. He trailed off, then found his resolve again. We should. We have the resources. We have the responsibility. Isaac smiled. I'll draft the proposal for the board. But Cade? They're going to ask why. Tell them I met someone who reminded me that businesses don't succeed because of spreadsheets and profit margins. They succeed because of people. And if we don't take care of our people, we don't deserve to succeed. Later that evening, Cade returned to the downtown bar for Mira's first closing shift as assistant manager. He stayed in the background, watching her navigate the controlled chaos with surprising confidence. She was patient with new servers, firm but fair with difficult customers, and meticulous about tip distribution. When a customer complained about their meal, she comped it without hesitation, then explained to the kitchen exactly how to correct the issue for next time. She was a natural. At midnight, after the last customer left and the staff finished closing duties, Mira found Cade sitting at the bar, reviewing reports on his laptop. "How'd I do?" she asked, nervous energy crackling around her. "You were excellent, confident, capable, compassionate. Everything I hoped for." She smiled, but it was tentative. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to be temporary." "It's not temporary. You earned this position. You'll keep earning it every shift." He closed his laptop and turned to face her fully. "How's your mother?" "Better. The new insurance covered her specialist appointment. They're adjusting her treatment plan." Mira's eyes welled up. "I never thought I was drowning, Mr. Lawson, for so long, and now—" "Cade. Call me Cade." "Cade," she corrected softly. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing me, for everything." "You don't need to thank me. You saved yourself by refusing to let this place break you. I just removed the person trying to break you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the bar quiet around them. "Can I ask you something?" Mira said. "Anything." "That night, when you came in looking like you had nothing, was that really just about investigating? Or was it something else?" Cade considered the question carefully. "Both. I was investigating complaints, but I was also testing myself, seeing if I could remember what it felt like to be on the other side, to be invisible. You wanted to remember where you came from. I needed to. I'd forgotten. And forgetting almost cost me everything that matters." He met her eyes. "You reminded me. With one choice, one moment of seeing someone when everyone else looked away." Mira smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Then I guess we saved each other." Cade couldn't argue with that. 3 months later, Lawson and Ledger's downtown location looked the same from the outside. Inside, everything had changed. Mira stood near the host stand on a Friday night, watching her team move through the dinner rush with practiced efficiency. Marcus managed the bar with quiet confidence. Janelle trained 2 new servers with patience Rylan never would have shown. The kitchen ran smoothly under a new head chef who actually listened to staff feedback. And everywhere, in every interaction, every transaction, every moment, there was something that had been missing before: respect. The tip auditing system flashed green on the POS screen as Mira verified the evening's distribution. Every dollar accounted for, every server paid fairly. No mysterious house fees, no disappearing cash. She approved the distribution and watched as the numbers updated in real time on each server's app. Transparency, accountability, trust. 3 months ago, these had been abstract concepts. Now they were the foundation of everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother's physical therapist. "Elena crushed her session today. She's making incredible progress." Mira smiled. Her mother was thriving. The new treatment plan was working. The financial pressure that had been suffocating them both had eased enough that they could finally breathe. She could finally breathe. "Mira?" She looked up to find Cade standing beside her. He'd started visiting more frequently, not to micromanage, but to listen, to understand, to stay connected to the people his business served and employed. "Evening rush treating you well?" he asked. "Beautifully, we're fully staffed, tips are strong, and I haven't had a single complaint all week." She gestured to the dining room. This is what it should have always been. It is now, thanks to you. Thanks to us, Mira corrected. You didn't just fire Rylan and throw money at the problem. You rebuilt the culture. That takes commitment. Cade nodded toward a corner booth. Speaking of culture, I think we might have a test case. Mira followed his gaze. A woman sat alone in the corner, her coat threadbare, her hands wrapped around a water glass like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She looked exhausted, lost, like she was carrying the weight of the world and couldn't find a place to set it down. Mira recognized that look immediately. She'd worn it herself, not so long ago. I'll take care of it, Mira said quietly. She crossed the dining room and approached the booth with a gentle smile. Evening, can I get you something? The woman hesitated. How much is your cheapest meal? There it was, the question that had started everything. Mira didn't hesitate. She pulled out her notepad and wrote nothing down. Let me bring you something good. On the house. The woman's eyes widened. I can't. You're not asking. I'm offering. Mira's voice was kind but firm. Everyone deserves a good meal. Let me get that for you. Tears welled in the woman's eyes. Thank you. Thank you. Mira squeezed her shoulder gently, then headed to the kitchen to place the order. When she returned to the host stand, Cade was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or recognition. You just did it again, he said softly. Did what? Changed someone's night, maybe their life, with one choice. Mira glanced back at the woman, who was now sitting a little straighter, hope flickering where despair had been moments before. That's what this place should be. Not just a bar, but a place where people are seen, where kindness isn't a risk, it's the standard. It is now, Cade said, because of pulpo like you. The night continued. The rush ebbed and flowed. Tables turned over. Customers laughed and ate and left generous tips that were distributed fairly and transparently. Around 11, the woman in the corner booth finished her meal and approached Mira at the host stand. She pressed a crumpled $5 bill into Mira's hand. It's all I have, she whispered. But I wanted you to know it mattered, what you did. It mattered. Keep it, Mira said, folding the woman's fingers back around the bill. Use it for what you need, and come back anytime. You're always welcome here. The woman left with tears streaming down her face, but this time, they were tears of gratitude, not despair. After the bar closed and the staff finished cleanup, Mira stood alone in the quiet dining room, taking in the transformation. 3 months ago, she'd been drowning, surviving, but not living. Working in a place that extracted everything she had and gave nothing back. Now she was managing a team she trusted, supporting a mother who was healing. Building a life that felt sustainable instead of suffocating. All because she'd made one choice: to be kind when kindness had a cost, to see someone when everyone else looked away, to choose humanity over self-preservation. Cade emerged from the office, locking up for the night. Heading out? In a minute. Just taking it in. He stood beside her, looking at the same space. It's different now, isn't it? Completely. Mira turned to him. You know what the best part is? It's not just this location. I heard the River Street Bar is implementing the same changes. And the West Side location. It's spreading. That's the goal. 15 locations, all rebuilt on the same principles. Respect, fairness, humanity. Cade smiled. And we're launching the foundation next month. Service industry relief. Real support for people who need it. Because of one burger? Because of one choice, Cade corrected, echoing the words he'd said months ago. Your choice. It exposed the corruption, yes. But more than that, it reminded me why this matters. Why any of this matters. Mira thought about the woman from earlier. About her mother sleeping peacefully at home, her breathing steady and strong, about Marcus and Janelle, and all the others who now had a workplace that valued them. About how one moment of compassion had become a catalyst for transformation. I'm glad I did it, she said finally. Even knowing what it cost at the time, I'd do it again. I know you would. That's why you're perfect for this. Cade extended his hand. Thank you, Mira, for everything. She shook his hand, then pulled him into a brief hug. Thank you for listening, for acting, for becoming the kind of owner who actually sees the people working for him. When they stepped outside into the cool night air, the city stretched out before them, full of possibility, full of people fighting battles no one could see, full of moments where one choice could change everything. Same time tomorrow? Cade asked. Mira smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Same time tomorrow. She walked to her car, her steps no longer weighed down by fear and exhaustion. Behind her, the bar stood quiet but transformed, a place where kindness had exposed corruption and sparked a revolution, where one waitress's compassion had reminded a millionaire what truly mattered, where humanity had won. And tomorrow, it would open its doors again, ready to see people, serve people, and treat them with the dignity everyone deserved. One order at a time, one choice at a time, one act of kindness at a time.